Out of all the British Governor Generals who came to India during the company's rule, without a shade of doubt, the most important one was Lord Dalhousie. The initiatives that he took, the annexations that he made, and the reforms that he ushered in, they all left a lasting impact on British Indian history. Today, in the series of modern Indian history, we will be discussing this seminal period of Governor Generalship of Lord Dalhousie. One of the very significant measures that was taken by Lord Dalhousie was annexation of Punjab to British India. This finally completed the political map of British India. But to understand how this took place, we have to pick up the thread of history of the Sikh kingdom where we had left last time. We had seen how, post the death of Guru Gobind Singh, his close follower Banda Singh Bahadur had assumed the leadership of the Sikh community. He had waged a long, gallant, but often unequal struggle against the declining Mughal power. After his capture and subsequent execution, we will see that there won't be a consolidated central challenge from the Sikhs as such. But this does not mean that the Sikhs were not fighting on. The nature of the fight was only different this time round. The Sikhs were now organized in what is called as a confederacy. There wasn't a single central leadership. Instead, there were about 12 missals in different parts of Punjab who were resisting the Mughal rule as well as fighting against foreign invaders like Ahmad Shah Abdali. The word missal is an Arabic word which means equal or alike. Perhaps this could be hinting at the status of equality that the Khalsa Panth actually is based on. It also means a state, and this seems to be a more closer meaning to the word missal given in the context of the Sikh history of this period. In these Sikh missals, 12 in number in all, the most powerful one was the Sukar Chakia missal. The Sukar Chakia missal. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who later will create the kingdom, create a Sikh kingdom, actually came from this same missal and was the son of the chief of this missal, Mahan Singh. So he is the leader of the Sukar Chakia missal. At a very young age, he will succeed his father, and when he is in his late teens, he will go on to establish his power over a very significant part of Punjab. Before we get into the history of how he will go about creating his kingdom, it is pertinent to have a look at this particular map of Punjab. This region over here, that is central Punjab, is the area of Sukar Chakia missal. From here, it will burst forth outwards and occupy a large part of Punjab. The other more famous missals included Ahluwalia, Nishaniya, Dalewalia, Bhangi missile in these areas. So these were some of the more prominent missils, but the most powerful one was definitely the Sukar Chakia missile, of which Maharaja Ranjit Singh, as a young boy, will be the chief. Let's go ahead and see the period of Maharaja Ranjit Singh as he goes about creating this Sikh state. Missals in Punjab when Maharaja Ranjit Singh, not yet a Maharaja of course, when he becomes a young man, at that time the missals in Punjab were disintegrating. We are talking about the latter half of the 18th century. There was constant turmoil in Afghanistan. Ahmad Shah Abdali had died. His son Timur Shah was not equal to the task, and there was a lot of court politics in Afghanistan that had made that region unstable. In this context, in 1799, Maharaja Ranjit Singh was made the governor of Lahore under Zaman Shah of Afghanistan. Remember, Ahmad Shah Abdali used to claim the whole of Punjab and Kashmir as part of his Afghan kingdom. So to start with, he is made the governor of Lahore. Slowly, steadily, as the Afghan power will become weak, Maharaja Ranjit Singh will become completely autonomous, and then he will go on expanding his territories. By 1805, he included the areas of Jammu and Amritsar under his command. Lahore became his political capital, whereas Amritsar was, of course, the religious capital of Punjab and was under his control. Naturally, his you can say importance amongst the other Sikh chiefs was at an all-time high. He made alliances with others in the region like Dogras and also the Nepalis, enlisting them in his army also. Maharaja Ranjit Singh was a tolerant person and a wise ruler also. He inducted other communities also in his army and in his administrative system so that the state would be strong. The state had to get the best of talent from amongst his subjects. So it was not an exclusivist kind of a state. Although no doubt it was a Sikh state, but then it was not an intolerant one. In 1809, as the power of East India Company was expanding in the subcontinent, both the sides understood each other's strength. Maharaja Ranjit Singh had a very formidable army, second only to East India Company in Asia. And East India Company too was wary about taking him on. At this stage, East India Company is yet to completely resolve the Maratha challenge. And therefore, they found it fitting to have good relations with Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This was especially important because Punjab was the gateway for the company to Afghanistan. And East India Company always felt very vulnerable because of interest of foreign powers like the French and the Russians. In 1807, Napoleon and the Tsar of Russia had signed a treaty of friendship. And together, they could possibly try to invade India, and that would be via Afghanistan's route, and Punjab was en route to that, and hence East India Company felt that it was important to have a friendly ruler in Punjab. So with that in mind, in 1809, they signed a treaty with each other, and via this treaty, Ranjit Singh's expansion was limited up to River Satluj, and his energies were now directed towards northern areas. Satluj became the boundary between the territories of Maharaja Ranjit Singh and East India Company. So now he will expand in other directions like Kangra towards Himachal. Kashmir will also be taken over. Later, we'll see that apart from Kashmir, Kangra, Multan in southern areas of Punjab, Peshawar towards Afghanistan near the Khyber Pass, all of these areas will be taken over by the Sikh state, and a strong consolidated state will be established by Maharaja Ranjit Singh. On a side note, guys, Peshawar and that frontier area today is part of Pakistan. Pakistan and neighboring Afghanistan, as we speak, are going through a rough patch because of differences over the Durand line that divides the two. Now, this Durand line was defined in the late 19th century by the Britishers. And wide that line, Peshawar and the frontier areas, they fell within British India, and consequently, Pakistan was able to inherit that. The British kept it on their side because they had inherited it from Maharaja Ranjit Singh, as in the Sikh kingdom. So since the Sikh kingdom had these areas, that is why it fell within the British control, and consequently you can say, as history would have it, that area is there with Pakistan. So Pakistan should also feel indebted to Maharaja Ranjit Singh for that. That was just on a side note. Tolerant and inclusive ruler that he was, he allowed complete religious freedom to his people, and he was respectful of saints and seers of all religions, Hindu saints as well as Muslim Sufi saints. He employed people from all communities in the Sikh state, especially in his army. There were Punjabi Muslims, there were Gurkhas, there were Hindus, and there were also Pathans too. He built a formidable multi-ethnic army on European lines. He had understood the value of European fighting techniques, and consequently we see his army was trained on European lines with many European officers, especially French officers. Many soldiers of fortune from France they were still loitering in India and they were ready to offer their services to different Indian princes. And Maharaja Ranjit Singh definitely had high value for European trained veteran fighters. Many of them, went to his court seeking employment. East India Company at this point was constantly worried about what was happening in Afghanistan. It wanted to have a stable Afghanistan which was under its influence. And therefore, it tried to put on the throne of Afghanistan a ruler who will be friendly to East India Company. Around this time, Shah Shuja of Afghanistan, ruler of Afghanistan, he had been dislodged from his throne and he had come to India to build alliances so that he could again get back his throne in Afghanistan. This is the time when East India Company sees it as an opportunity of replicating that same textbook model that they had done in different parts of India. So they take up the cause of Shah Shuja and sign a tripartite treaty. East India Company, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, as well as the ruler of Afghanistan, that is Shah Shuja, and they will try to foist him on the throne. This will later lead to the First Anglo-Afghan War. The history of these wars is going to come up separately in neighborhood relations. So that's why I don't want to tangle it up over here. The point that I want to stress over here is that East India Company saw great value in the friendship of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, because for them, Afghanistan was very crucial, and to go to Afghanistan, they had to pass through the territories of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He refused to allow pass to East India Company's army so that they could reach Afghanistan, because he did not want to get entangled in that particular conflict, although later these conflicts are going to escalate after his death. He dies in 1839, and unfortunately for the Sikh state, there wasn't a worthy successor to Maharaja Ranjit Singh. After his death, we will see a series of chaos and instability taking place. One after another, different princes came to the throne, but they did not last long. Sometimes due to conspiracies and sometimes pure accidents, these princes could not live for a long period, and this led to a lot of political chaos in the immediate years after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. There were many factions at the court. There was constant conflict amongst the Sikh nobles and also the Dogra chiefs, and all of this led to economic disruption in the nascent Sikh state. Successors, whoever came to the throne, were either incompetent or ultimately assassinated by rival court factions. Finally, Rani Jindan, the youngest queen of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and her very young son Dalip Singh, they were called from Jammu area, and they were made, Dalip Singh was made the ruler and Rani Jindan was made the regent of the Sikh state. Now this will start a period of a lot of instability in the Sikh state, which will give East India Company the opportunity to interfere. They first faced opposition from other claimants of the throne, others who were interested on taking over the throne. They even allowed British troops. Since the Sikh state was not very strongly ruled at this point, British troops were allowed to march through Punjab for the First Anglo-Afghan War. The Britishers, when they could see the ruin inside of the British state, the decay that had crept in, they saw it as an opportunity for themselves to interfere and aggrandize themselves, as they had done in different parts of India earlier. Very much the same kind of story being repeated here too, which the English will try to use to their advantage. That, by the way, is a painting of Rani Jindan, who was the regent during this period. Before we go ahead, guys, let me make a very quick announcement, and a very important one for all of you. The P2I Prelims to Interview September evening batch has already started from 22nd of September, and we are soon going to close the admissions to this batch. If you haven't yet enrolled for this, then this is your opportunity for doing it right away. This is a one-stop solution batch for all your preparation needs for September 2000 for UPSC 2024's attempt. If you are targeting 2024, then it is high time that you really put your back into your preparation. And for that reason, we are here to watch your back. Okay, this batch extends to you live classroom teaching in online format. It provides you with world-class quality textbooks to prepare for different subjects, a lot of copious study material, test series, mentorship and hand-holding, and many other features at every stage of the exam. What's more, if you crack the prelims exam, then you have an all expenses paid mains residential program in Delhi. Yes, we take care of your entire mains preparation. As soon as the prelims result is out, you just need to pick up your bag and come to Delhi, where your accommodation, your boarding, your teaching, everything is our responsibility without a single dime being spent by you. We have special programs for interview guidance also for those who will clear and make it to the next round. Long story short, it really has all the awesome features that your preparation requires. So don't waste any further time. Use my code JD Live and enroll for this batch with a handsome discount. To get the PDFs of this lecture, you can reach my Telegram channel, Jawwad Kazi Current Affairs, using this QR code and get updates of my lectures as well. Now let us go and see how the first Anglo-Punjab war or Anglo-Sikh war is going to be fought. The larger context of this war cannot be forgotten. In the larger context, we have to see that the East India Company has become aggressive and it has annexed Sindh by this point of time, which was completely in violation of all the earlier promises made to the chiefs of Sindh. The person, Charles Napier, who did that annexation, actually, I told you in my last class, had messaged that we have sinned. We have sinned, meaning, there's a pun over there. He says that he has got sinned. At the same time, he is saying that we have made a grave crime by doing it. And this annexation of Sindh was naturally seen with great suspicion by the Sikh kingdom also. Gwalior, which saw an opportunity after the first Anglo-Afghan war, where East India Company was badly beaten, Gwalior rebelled and it was brutally suppressed and taken over for a brief while. All of these developments in the background context made the Sikhs feel that now the only power that was left actually to challenge the East India Company was the Sikh kingdom, the Punjab. So naturally, East India Company will train its guns on Punjab. Around this time, Satluj River was the boundary that both the powers had decided. Because a lot of miscommunication, because a lot of apprehensions, the Sikh army crossed the river Satluj and started to take some positions. East India Company basically was waiting for this opportunity only. East India Company made the most of this opportunity and sent a huge force under Sir Hugh Gough. Sir Hugh Gough, with his army, defeated the Sikhs, and this was interpreted as reason for war. There were 5 major battles in which the Sikh army was defeated, and at the end of this, some part of Punjab will be annexed and a huge indemnity will be imposed on the Sikh kingdom. Treaty of Lahore was signed in this context in 1846, and we'll now see the major provisions of this Treaty of Lahore. A heavy indemnity of 1 crore was to be paid by the Sikh kingdom. The Jalandhar Doab was to be annexed by East India Company. Earlier, the border was river Satluj. Now, the Doab, that is beyond Satluj river, the Doab is called as Jalandhar Doab. That Doab will be annexed. The Sikh army will be reduced, meaning many troops will now be dislocated, unemployed. A British resident was to be accepted at Lahore, which used to be their typical way of handling things. And Henry Lawrence was made the resident over there. This map will give you a clearer picture. This is river Satluj and this is river Beas. So Satluj used to be the boundary as per the Treaty of 1809. Now, since the Sikh army had crossed this river, it gave an opportunity for the Britishers to send a strong force from Ambala, and that is how Hugh Gough will cross over and ultimately capture Lahore also. This is Lahore, here is Amritsar. This doab is called as the Jalandhar doab, which is between Bias and Satluj. Beyond this, between Ravi and Satluj over here, you have the Badi doab. Okay, Punjab, because it is made of 5 rivers, as we all know. Punj Ab. Ab is an Arabic Persian word. Ab means water. Doab is an area between 2 rivers. That's what it is called. Doab. And this Jalandhar Doab is now annexed by Treaty of Lahore. I hope you got this, guys. Now, what is the outcomes of this war? We saw the treaty. After the war, the Sikhs were not in a position to pay such a huge amount. It is a massive amount, guys. It is a huge amount. Now, it is not possible for them to pay the amount. Therefore, the Sikhs were, or the Kingdom of Punjab had to cede Kashmir to East India Company, right? So here, this area is Jammu, and beyond that you have Kashmir. This area is under the Dogra chief, Gulab Singh Dogra. Gulab Singh Dogra, he bought Kashmir from East India Company for 75 lakhs under Treaty of Amritsar 1846. Treaty of Amritsar 1846. Kashmir was given to East India Company, and East India Company, handed it over to Gulab Singh Dogra for a payment of 75 lakh rupees. That is how the Raja of the Dogra chief of Jammu, Gulab Singh, came to hold Kashmir. And that is the lineage that continued right up to independence. Maharaja Hari Singh, who will accede to India, is from that same family, same lineage. The Sikhs rebelled against this treaty, but they were once again suppressed and forced to sign Treaty of Bhairawal in 1846. Treaty of Bhairawal in 1846. As per this treaty, Rani Jindan, who was the queen mother and regent, she was removed from that position and she was taken away. Earlier, first she was sent to Banaras and then elsewhere. Dalip Singh will also be taken under the custody of the East India Company. Now they established a council of regency under the British resident Henry Lawrence. Henry Lawrence will be the resident. Henry Lawrence, not to be confused with his younger brother John Lawrence. Both of them were brothers, and both of them are going to play a very remarkable role for East India Company during the revolt of 1857. Okay, not so far from this point. Now let us see the Second Anglo-Sikh War. Cause of this was constant interference of the Britishers in the state of Punjab through the resident. And this was their typical practice. The resident was not sent there as a neutral third empire. He was there to actually enter into the politics of the prince's court and try to aggrandize the interest of East India Company. Parallelly, a revolt was led by the governor of Multan, who was called as Mool Raj. This revolt by Mool Raj gave the opportunity for different different people with power in the Punjab to actually rise up against East India Company. Once again, the British sent a huge army and defeated the Sikhs in this Second Anglo-Punjab War and annexed Punjab in 1849. This will be done under Lord Dalhousie. Okay. John Lawrence, the younger of the two, will be made Chief Commissioner slightly later in 1853. Chief Commissioner in 1853, who will report directly to the Governor General of India, that is Lord Dalhousie. This structure will be created. After this war was over, the East India Company had a taste of the bravery of people of Punjab, particularly the Sikhs, and we will see that East India Company will employ the Sikhs in big numbers in their army. And this will continue as a practice in British Indian Army. The Sikhs will also be one of the martial races that they will declare after revolt of 1857. Sikhs fought loyally for the British after this point in later wars. Excellent soldiers that they were fighting for the East India Company, later the British Army, and they fought quite loyally. Even in the revolt of 1857, Sikhs, Pathans and Gurkhas, they played a very stellar role in suppressing the revolt of 1857. This is what the province of Punjab looked like during the British times, guys. You can download the notes from my Telegram channel so that you can have a look at these areas. It's very interesting and fascinating to look at old maps, which region fell under which control, which province was created in which times. Somehow I really find that very fascinating. And if you're like me, then I'm sure you will love to have a look at some of these maps that I share. Let's go ahead. Now let us talk about Lord Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie's other measures. Lord Dalhousie in many ways laid the foundations of modern India. This can be, agreed to if we, look at the several projects that he will undertake in India. Aristocratic in background, he came from, again, like many other governor generals, from a very blue-blooded, line. He was from the British peerage, and after annexation of Punjab, his peerage will be raised to that of a marquess. He was aristocratic and despotic by disposition. His attitude was like that of a despot. I mean, my word has to be listened to. That is the kind of attitude he has. He will start a policy of annexations in India. Policy of annexations so that the British rule is firmly established over the Indian subcontinent. For this, that is for the annexations, he used both war, that is through conquest he got annexations like we see in case of Punjab. We'll also see in case of Burma. And in peace, he used the doctrine of lapse to annex territories of princely states of India. And also he will use the alibi of misrule to take over Indian provinces, territories of Indian princes. The annexations that were made through conquest include Punjab, which we have seen, Second Anglo-Punjab War is fought during Dalhousie's period. Lower Burma or Pegu will be annexed in 1852. This we are seeing separately in neighborhood relations very shortly. So we won't be discussing this in detail at this point. The entire story of Burma is coming up in neighborhood relations. And some districts of Sikkim also were taken over. In this manner, annexations were done through war and conquest. But then an even more effective tool that he used was that of doctrine of lapse. Doctrine of lapse. Now let us see what was this doctrine of lapse and how Dalhousie used this. This idea of doctrine of lapse that you might remember from your class 8 standard textbooks, dear students, was not a new one. Already, the Court of Directors in 1834 had proclaimed that permission to adoption shall be by exception and not rule. What is meant by this? If an Indian prince does not have a male offspring, then the natural step, logical step for him was to adopt one from amongst his extended family. Now here, East India Company said that permission to this adoption was by exception and not rule. It was not as if every Indian prince will automatically be given the right of adoption in case he does not have a male heir. But here East India Company is saying that yes, that is allowed, but then as an exception, not as a rule, as was the case earlier in India. Adoption was a routine thing that used to happen in Indian princely state. Dalhousie used this idea of the Court of Directors in a uniform and extensive manner. And it will be in his period that we will see doctrine of lapse will be used extensively for annexation purposes. Dalhousie's argument was that old ruling system, that is, old ruling system as in there are princely states and the overlord is the British rule here in India. This led to artificial intermediate powers. And this was not a very conducive situation for people. It led to miseries of people. As if the British were very concerned about the well-being of people, he said that these kind of systems and ideas led to misrule and misery of people, and therefore we need to stop this to the extent possible. But the real ulterior motive, of course, was expansion of the British Empire here in India, expansion and consolidation of British rule here in India. With that intention, Lord Dalhousie will implement the idea of doctrine of lapse. Now let us see how Indian states were categorized when it came to application of doctrine of lapse. Indian states were categorized into three categories. The first category was non-tributary states. Who were these states? These were the states who had never been subordinate to the paramount power. Okay, they had never been subordinate to East India Company's power. Second states were tributary states who were subordinate to Mughal Peshwa, and now they had become subordinate to British power. So the first states, they had never been subordinate to any such power earlier, neither Indian power nor AIC. So independent throughout. Second state is subordinate to Mughals or Peshwa, and now they are subordinate to British paramount power. And third states were states that were created or revived by sanads or grants. Revived by sanads or grants by whom? By the British government itself. Revived by sanad or grant by the British government itself, as in they owed their existence. They owed their existence to the British rule. It was the British rule that had revived them. These were the three types of states. Now, each of these states had a different, rule applying to it. In case of state 1, no right to British to decide on adoptions, since they were never under any paramount power, they were free to decide whatever they wanted. Second type of state, rulers shall acquire assent to adoption. They have to take permission for adoption from the British. And this permission may or may not be given. British have the right to refuse it. They have the right to refuse. They may give or they may not give. The third type of state, which were created by sanads by the British themselves, these third type of states, succession by adoption was never to be allowed. Never allowed. The third type of state. Okay. The whole idea is that the state has been revived as a gift from the British for your male descendants. But then if there is no male descendant, you cannot pass on that gift to somebody else. It has to come back to the original entity, that is the British. That is the idea in case of the third type of states. Okay, so this is how it was made applicable. And we see many states during his times will be taken up. 1848, Satara. You remember, after the defeat of Marathas in the Third Anglo-Maratha War, a state of Satara was revived under a descendant of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Okay. 1850, Sambalpur. Again, Baghat, Udaipur, Jhansi, Nagpur. All of these states will meet a similar fate. Udaipur will be returned later. That's a different story altogether. But then this is how many states had to face the challenge of doctrine of lapse. Now let us see what is the criticism on Lord Dalhousie regarding application of this doctrine. Number 1, right of adoption. Now, as a matter of custom, adoption was something very old in Indian society. Princely states, rulers had been using this for centuries. So this doctrine of lapse was something alien to them and actually invasive. It was interfering in the customs, traditions and practices of the Indian princely states, which have traditionally used adoption for continuation of their succession. Then line demarcating between dependent state and protected allies was very thin. That type of state number 2 and state number 3. It was a very thin line that distinguished between these two. And in many cases, the debate used to be about which category the state fell into, category number 2 or category number 3, as we saw in our earlier discussion. Naturally, the states wanted to fall in category number 2, where they would have at least some scope for being accepted, adoption in their case being accepted. Disputed interpretation. In case there was this dispute regarding which category the state fell in, then decision of East India Company was final. Court of Directors would take this decision, and therefore there was no independent body as such to take a call on these cases. मेरा मुंसिफ ही मेरा कातिल है, मेरे हक में क्या फैसला होगा. This is a couplet from Urdu. Mera munsif means my murderer is sitting as the judge. My murderer is sitting as the judge. Mere hak mein kya faisla hoga? How on earth will I get justice? So this was an unfair system as such. I hope you got this, guys. What were some of the other annexations? Apart from this use of doctrine of lapse, East India Company also annexed some other territories. Like for example, Berar was annexed during Dalhousie's times in 1853. Berar was part of the Nizam of Hyderabad's territory. Now, Nizam had failed to pay the stipulated sum for maintaining the force of East India Company in Hyderabad. Okay. In Sikandrabad area, modern day Hyderabad, this area was basically created for the purpose of military cantonments, and even today Sikandrabad has cantonment area. So East India Company's army used to be posted over there ostensibly for the protection of the Nizam, for which he had to pay. Now, since the amount was very huge and Nizam was not able to pay for it, what happened was Nizam was compelled to cede the cotton producing areas of Berar. Mid 19th century, remember, industrial revolution is at its peak. Cotton is in great demand in Britain. Berar is a cotton growing area. Berar includes, parts of Vidarbha of Maharashtra and some parts of Madhya Pradesh also. So this is the cotton belt basically. The black regular soil, the climate of this area, all of this facilitates growth of cotton. So Berar was annexed for this reason. It was calculated to yield revenue for maintenance of Hyderabad contingent to the company. So in this manner, Berar was taken over from Nizam of Hyderabad. The second type or second example of annexation is annexation of Awadh. Now, Awadh was a state which had signed the Treaty of Allahabad and since then had been at very friendly terms with the East India Company. The Nawabs of Awadh used to feel like the Governor General is a personal family friend. They always entertained and always tried to give the best that they could to East India Company. But all of that loyalty of Awadh was not sufficient for East India Company from annexing it, stopping EIC from annexing it. In 1856, giving reasons of misrule, that is, Awadh is not being governed properly. People are not very happy. That is why we want to annex Awadh. Nawab Wajid Ali Shah of Awadh was given this shocker that your territory is now being annexed because you are not a good enough ruler. Well, no doubt Wajid Ali Shah was an effete kind of a person, not exactly the person that you would like to see as a ruler, but people were more happy under him than in EIC's rule. East India Company used this only as an alibi. In fact, when EIC's rule will come in Awadh area, that is when a lot of East India Company's soldiers of the Bengal army will first time feel the pinch of the company's rule. You see, revolt of 1857 was revolt of the Bengal army, not of Bombay and Madras army. It was the Bengal army. And a lot of soldiers from the Bengal army, they came from Awadh area and now they could feel what EIC was doing. The revenue policies were particularly hurting. They were ultimately, as Bipin Chandra says, they were they were peasants in uniforms. Peasants in uniforms. So naturally, they felt the pinch. Nawab's dependence on company for defense and law and order now ultimately had an effect on his survival itself. Nawab ignored welfare of people. There was constant interference of East India Company in the Nawab's rule, and this misrule was used as an alibi, excuse by EIC to annex it. But even after annexation, East India Company did not in any case give a very brilliant rule as such which would make people happy. People continued to suffer even more under EIC's rule. There's a very interesting quote of Lord Dalhousie which in a way tells us about the attitude that they had towards Indian princes. Nawab of Awadh, who had gone out of the way to maintain very good relations with East India Company, he happened to send his crown, not this one, this is only for depiction purposes. He sent his crown, which he was very fond of, to London for an exhibition. And this is what Lord Dalhousie had written about this event. He said, the wretch of Lucknow, that's what he describes him as, the wretch of Lucknow, who has sent his crown to the exhibition, would have done his people and us a great service if he had sent his head in it. And he never would have missed it. That is a cherry which will drop into our mouths one day. That is a cherry which will drop into our mouths one day. The intent of the Governor General Lord Dalhousie was very clear from the start. He wanted to take over Awadh for sure. There's a very interesting film on this, guys, Shatranj Ke Khiladi, based on a short story of Munshi Premchand. This movie, made by Satyajit Ray, the great Satyajit Ray, is about the culture in Awadh at this point when East India Company will take over. The effete Nawab, the decadent nobility, and the rapacious East India Company. All of these have been very vividly captured in the short story and the movie based on it. 1977, I think the movie came out somewhere. I'll recommend that you all watch this movie. It is there, I think, on YouTube also. It's a very nice movie which tells us how elites of that time were engrossed in pleasure, and consequently East India Company could go about doing what it was doing. All right. Next major development of this period is railways, the railway development. British dominion in India would be bound by iron lines. And these iron lines which would be stretched across the country starting from the period of Lord Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie had been a minister, junior minister or something like that under Peel, British Prime Minister Peel. And there he was given the charge of railroads. And he had very effectively tackled the issue of railroads there. By the way, around 1814, railways was first started there in England, initially for transporting coal. That was the whole intent of it. Before railways was invented, the problem was factories had to be closer to the coal mines, which means away from the cities. So this was not financially very viable. And hence, railways were developed so that coal could be taken to factories, which could be there in city areas, urban areas. 1833, for the first time, they started to use railways for transporting people. They started to transport people using railways. Now, that same Dalhousie who had played a significant role in development of railways in Britain, he had come here to India. So this was an obsession that he brought with him. He came out with his famous Railway Minute of 1853, which gave a strategic vision of railways in India. This was the plan which laid out how future railways would be expanded in India. And as you would know, first railway train ran from Bombay to Thane in 1853. By the way, the first railway was to run from Kolkata. But accidentally, that engine, which was being carried on a steamer down the Hooghly River, that steamer capsized and that engine was drowned, could not be recovered back then. So the line from Bombay to Thane got that, sort of privilege of boasting. Okay. I remember in my school times, this was something that every student had to cram up, hoping that the quiz master will ask this question in the school quiz. But even then, the quiz masters knew what you read and what you know, just like UPSC often knows what you read and how much you know. So the question never focused on this. Anyways, coming back here. So few railway lines were laid in Madras Presidency also shortly. By 1856, various routes were surveyed and constructed. And by the way, around 1870, I've seen a map, 1870, major strategic points were connected using railways, including frontier right up to that area of northwest frontier. Railway lines in India were not being built by the Indian government, the British Indian government. As in, the funding for this was coming from private enterprise. And who was investing here? Which private enterprise? It was English capital that was investing this money over here as an opportunity for investment. British capitalists wanted to use India as a field of investment, and their capital was coming to India and being invested in railways to get an assured rate of return. This was a very handsome rate of return for those days. Minimum 5% was the guarantee of the state. It was a state guarantee. Okay. In no way can this return go wrong because the state is promising it. So 5% and more. That was the range in which these British capitalists earn money. It encouraged trade and commerce in India, played a role in uniting the country, It enabled people to travel very easily, okay, and that really brought the whole of country together. It enabled and fostered the development of modern Indian nationalism also. It was done with strategic thinking in mind. The Britishers wanted to exploit India's markets, its natural resources, and also quick movement of troops for defense related purpose. They will always be very, very, very about defending the crown jewel India. And railways, which allowed quick movement of troops, would give them a very big advantage. Okay. So this is how railways were brought to India during Lord Dalhousie's time. I hope you got this, guys, regarding railway development. Now, a few other reforms. Electric telegraph. Okay. TAR, as it used to be called earlier. Electric telegraph was also an innovation that Lord Dalhousie implemented in India. 4,000 miles of telegraph line was laid out. He connected Calcutta with Peshawar, Bombay, Madras, and other parts of India. Can you imagine that? In that day and age, he connected Calcutta with such distant areas. And this gave such a huge advantage to East India Company, especially during revolt of 1857. Bipin Chandra writes in his book that a soldier who was about to be hanged after revolt of 1857, he said, "We are not being hanged by that rope. We are being hanged by that wretched telegraph line. That is what is strangling us." That was the great advantage that EIC had, thanks to Lord Dalhousie. Apart from this, he also brought about postal reforms. Already in 1837, the first Postal Act had been passed. Now, in 1854, a new Post Office Act was passed under Lord Dalhousie. A Director General was appointed to superintend the work of post offices in all presidencies. Uniform rates for the sake of postage. Half anna, I think it was back then. Uniform rates irrespective of distance. How much ever distance you want to send, there is a uniform rate, and this rate will be charged through postage stamps that you were going to buy. Affix that postage stamp and give that letter in the Dak Bangla, Dak Ghar, and there it will be stamped and sent to the address that you have mentioned on the envelope. This is how modern postage system developed here in India. So this was a very significant measure which enabled again connection of the whole country. Communication became much more easier. Apart from this, Public Works Department, PWD. Public Works Department, PWD, which we have under all state governments now. Nomenclature may change in some areas maybe, but then largely the same kind of work. All kind of construction of public works was now brought under this department, PWD, which earlier was part of military board. So this separate department is come up. It is given substantial funds and it is made to build infrastructure in different areas. Extensive irrigation works were taken up for this purpose. Dalhousie wanted to augment revenue, and for that irrigation was crucial. Bridges, canals, many other roads, all of these were taken up. The Grand Trunk Road, GT Road as it is called, that was built first during the times of Sher Shah Sur. That Grand Trunk Road was also given a great boost under the PWD, the Public Works Department. Commercial reforms. He threw open commerce of the world to Indian ports. Karachi, Bombay, Calcutta, these were developed. Agriculture was specially focused. The supply of raw materials from India, hinterlands of India, was now very easily possible. Now you have railways, you have roads, you have better connectivity, you have communication systems. The ports have been opened up. Naturally, this led to a lot of increase of trade for British India. So these were the reforms that Lord Dalhousie implemented. We are still left to see the Wood's Dispatch of 1854, but then that I'm going to cover separately in the theme of education. It is more fitting to see it over there because you will be able to appreciate the evolution of education in our country. The themes are going to come up after we are able to cover a substantial part of our syllabus. This concludes our discussion for today, guys. I hope you found this session valuable, and if you did, then do like this video and share it with your friends and leave some love in the comment box below. Thank you. I'll see you in my next class.